Welcome to Part 3 in the Oracle BI training series OBIEE for end users. As the training sessions migrate from consuming data to creating content, i.e. reports and dashboards, you should start noticing how simple it is to create your own reports in Oracle BI. By using MeasureIT Analytics pre-built reporting for Oracle eBusiness Suite, any company that owns Oracle EBS and needs reporting or to replace Oracle Discover can easily create reporting and analytics with this solution with little to no IT involvement. Now that you've learned how to navigate Oracle BI and use the dashboards to consume your data, let's get to some of the good parts, which includes creating your own reports in this session. Two things I want you to keep aware of during this session. The first is just how easy it is to create reports in Oracle BI. And the second, which is most important, is the presentation layer and the data model that are in play on top of the Oracle eBusiness Suite data that we're going to be consuming here. Notice how simple the MeasureIT solution makes it to create reports from the Oracle eBusiness Suite dataset using the best tool on the planet, Oracle BI. A good practice when creating reports in any tool, not just Oracle BI, is knowing what you're doing before you do it. So here is our quick report goal for this session. The goal is a report called Payment Term Analysis. And what we want to find in our data here, the description, is supplier payments by year and payment term, which a normal company could use to analyze what type of payment terms are you extending to suppliers to determine if you want to change those to keep more cash in your pocket on a daily basis. So let's get started writing this report. To begin, go up to the New in the File menu and click New and then Analysis. You can see in this drop-down all of the subject areas for Oracle eBusiness Suite. In this case, we want to pick the Accounts Payable subject area to create our report. Once you select your subject area, the Analysis Editor opens, otherwise known as Report Editor, and you'll notice it's blank when you start, of course. So our goal is to take columns from the subject area on the left-hand side of the screen. In this case, you can see it's the Accounts Payable subject area. Grab the columns we need and move them to the Selected Columns area on the right side of the screen, as well as apply filters to that data so we only get the data we're looking for and not all of the accounts payable data since the beginning of time. Before we get started, I put the report goal in the bottom right-hand side of the screen so you can remember what we're trying to do, which is a fairly basic report of payment terms by supplier and year. Now let's get started by selecting the time dimension in our report. To select fields for time, navigate to the subject area on the left-hand side of the screen, and notice we're in the Accounts Payable subject area. Use the little arrows to the left of the time dimension. Click on it to expand time, and now you will see the various elements of the time dimension. In our case, we want to grab year and quarter, so we will just click on the year field and drag it over to the Selected Columns area. Next, we'll grab the quarter field. In this case, you can use the other option of just double-clicking on the word quarter, and it will move it to the Selected Columns area. It works the same as dragging it over. Use the same arrow to collapse the time dimension so we can go on to the other fields we need. The next field is operating unit, which in Oracle EBS speak is similar to a company. Next, we'll add the supplier name from the supplier dimension. And then from the Accounts Payable Invoice header, let's grab the term name. And last, let's go to the AP Payments folder to grab information about the payments to suppliers. Let's grab payment count and amount. Now that we've selected the columns that we want in our report, the next goal will be to format these columns and filter these columns to get the report as we need them. A lot of that functionality within each column is under the settings icon, which is the little wheel-looking icon that's highlighted here. You'll notice when you click on that, you get a list of options including sort, edit formula, column properties, filter, delete, save column add. So we'll go through and look at all of those options as we're creating this report. Okay, so let's start by filtering this report by the year column. Click on the settings icon next to the year and then select filter. For this demo, we'll filter on the year of 2008. So click on the arrow next to the values section and scroll down and select 2008 and click OK. Let's also apply a filter for operating unit. In this case, we want to select all the operating units that begin with the word vision. So instead of selecting them one at a time, click on the search option at the bottom left hand of the screen. Since we want operating units that begin with the word vision, type the word vision with a capital V and then click on the search button. Use the double arrows to move all of these values into the selected side of the screen. Then select OK. Now that we have some reasonable filters so we don't run a report that gets data since the beginning of time, let's go ahead and click on the Results tab at the top of the screen to see what the report looks like so far. Our initial draft looks reasonable, so since you like it and it works so far, the first thing you should probably do is save it so we don't lose what we've done to this point. To save a report, click on the Save icon in the upper right hand side of the screen. In this dialog, we will choose a folder to save our report. In this case, I've already created a folder called Training Reports that will save this in. So click on that folder and then choose a name and click OK to save your report. Now that we have our basic data, let's start making this report look a little bit nicer. To begin with, let's click on the View Properties icon and change the properties of this table output. You don't really need to focus on everything in the screen. A few quick check boxes that make this report look instantly nicer from a detailed data perspective would be the content paging, as well as the row styling and duplicate values. Make sure these three are checked on, and then let's take a look and see how this report looks. That report looks a lot better. Let's clean it up a little bit by adding some sorts and some column formats. To add some report level column sorts, go back to the Criteria tab at the top of the screen, and then let's click on the settings icon next to the year field. Click on the sort option and then sort ascending. Next, let's add a secondary sort to the quarter field. Click on the settings icon again and then click sort and add ascending sort option. Actually, let's change our mind and sort by supplier. To do this, just click on the settings icon next to the supplier name, click on sort, and then sort ascending. Since we didn't use the add ascending sort option, this will delete the prior two sorts that we added to the report. To see what columns are being sorted by, you can notice next to the field name is a little up or down arrow. Next, let's go to the amount field and change the column properties to make it look a little bit better. To do this, click on the settings icon next to amount and click column properties. In this dialog, to change how the data looks, go to the Data Format tab, and then first you need to check on the Override Default button at the top of the screen, and then you can change the decimal places to 2, and in this case, also check the Use Thousands separator option. Once we're done, click on the Results tab to see what our new output looks like. So now that we're done changing the properties, the report looks a lot better. But so far it's still just a report. If you look on the bottom left hand of the screen, I've highlighted what's called the Views section of the report creation dialog. You'll notice we have a title view and a table view, which are both showed in the compound layout to the right. Why Oracle calls this an analysis instead of a report is because you can have multiple views of the same data in the same analysis. So let's continue on and create a pivot table format and a chart format of the same data within this same analysis. So let's start by creating a pivot table out of this data set. To do that, click on the little chart icon and then click the pivot table option. The pivot table format is very similar to a pivot table in Excel. The key layout sections for a pivot table include the pivot table prompts, which works very similar to page items in an Excel pivot table, the sections area, which works as page breaks. Then we have the rows, columns, and measures area, which work exactly like that in an Excel pivot table. And last, at the bottom of the screen, is the excluded area for columns that are included in this analysis, but you want to not include in your pivot table. When editing a pivot table format, it's a good idea to turn off the display. That way it doesn't recalculate the report every time you move a column around. So I'm going to click on the icon to turn the display off, and then I'll move the columns around to where we want them for this pivot table. So I moved all the fields to the areas where we want them for this report. You can see the operating unit or company code is in the pivot table prompt section. Across the rows we have the term name. Across the top of the report, the columns, we have the year and the quarter. And then we're showing measures for account of payment terms as well as the total dollar amount. You can see in this example in the excluded area, I've also put the supplier down there as we don't want to look at the supplier in this summary version. For this output, we would like totals at the bottom of the rows, so click on the summation icon in the rows area and then select after to put the totals at the bottom. Let's tweak the design just a little bit. Let's take the payment count measure and move it to the excluded area so we can just focus on the total dollar amount in the initial output. After that, click the display icon so you can see your results. That pivot table looks fairly nice, so go ahead and click on the Done button in the upper right hand corner to finish this up. That brings us back to the Results tab, where you can notice we now have another view in the View area of the analysis. So we have Title, Table, and Pivot Table. Now that we've created two views in this analysis, a table and a pivot table, we need to introduce the concept of the compound layout, which is what we use within an analysis to display the different views in different formats. Let's start by just putting the pivot table and the table side by side in this output. To do that, just drag and drop the pivot table from the view section on the left over to the right side of the table view. So that's an interesting view of the two reports side by side, but not something I would want to put in a dashboard for users to consume. To do something better, let's go over to the Views section and click on the little chart icon one more time and select Other Views and then View Selector. The caption defaults empty, so I generally type Select a View in this area. The next step is to include the views that you want in this View Selector. I generally do this from a summary to a detail perspective. In this case, I took the pivot table and the table views from the left-hand side of Available Views to the views included on the right-hand side. Pivot table is on top, so it will be the default format. Once we click Done, you can notice that now in the Views area, we have a View Selector option. The next thing we want to do in our compound layout on the right is to take the table and the pivot table formats out of the layout. To do that, just click on the X in the upper right-hand corner to delete them off the compound layout. Don't worry, they're not going anywhere. Next, just drag and drop the View Selector view into your compound layout. Now our report layout will default with the pivot table view, and a user can go into the Select a View dropdown and select the table as an option. Now let's pretty this up by adding a chart to our pivot table format. To do that, click on the pivot table in the View area of the screen and then click on the pencil, which is the edit icon. To add a graph to the output, click on the Graph Pivoted Results icon in the top of the screen. This results in a default chart showing up to the right. Let's change that to a pie chart instead of the bar graph that's showing. To do that, use the new charting options that appeared once we added the chart to this pivot table. That looks pretty cool. Payment terms by quarter. And it was pretty easy too, wasn't it? Let's create one more view. It's nice to see the filters that get applied to your report, and that by default is not on the report output, so you have to click on the filters view and generate it and then add it to your output. So let's click on filters and get that started. There's really nothing to do for filter views, so just click Done. We can add the filters to the report output or to the View Selector. I'll show you both methods. First, let's drag it into the report output. Sometimes I like to have the filters shown when the report comes up. In this case, it's a pretty chart and graph, so let's get rid of the filters and add them to the View Selector so people can see them on demand, but they're not in your face as soon as you open up the report. First, click the X and delete it from the compound layout. Then edit the View Selector. Add the filter view as the third option. And most importantly, don't forget to save your work. So that's a pretty good looking report. But what if someone already made that report and it's on a dashboard somewhere? In the next step, I just want to show you, if there's a report out there somewhere else, how to find it and save it as your own. Now we know there's a report similar to this one on the Accounts Payable Metrics dashboard, so let's navigate there, find the report, and save it. So here we found a report on the dashboard that talks about payment terms, vendors, and time. So let's go to the bottom of the screen and let's do the navigation to save this for ourselves. You can use the Analyze or Edit link to open this in edit mode. Open, click the Save As link. We'll save it in the training reports folder where we put the other report. And last, let's open up our original report from the catalog and see how it's going to look in a dashboard. Click on Catalog from the File menu, then navigate to the Training Reports folder and click Open on our AP Payments report. Notice we're clicking Open instead of Edit. Now we're viewing the report from the consumer perspective versus a report editor perspective. And we can use the View selector and check out the different formats. Remember, it defaulted to Pivot Table, so let's select Table and check that out. Table's nice, but the chart was cooler. We'll check out the filters. And that concludes part 3 in our series, Creating Reports in Oracle BI. We hope you'll join us for part 4, where we'll teach you how to create dashboards using the reports that were created during this session.